you very much for the kind introduction and for School of Bhakti allowing me this opportunity to say something about Shiva Mahadev on the Mahashivaratri here in London. I can see there's lots of participants, and I'm very excited because the class this morning was really wonderful by Neelamani Mataji. She went over some very essential fundamental points of Shiva Tattva in relationship to Krishna devotion. And I'm going to be going over, well, I mean, the poster said it, exclusive pastimes. I'm not quite sure what what they're thinking exclusive pastimes are, but I've got some, I'll be sharing some information that in my research on Shiva Tattva and how it relates to Krishna consciousness, it's actually quite, I think it's quite interesting and quite profound in terms of how devotees can actually um, enter deeper into their own sense of Krishna bhakti through the agency of Shiva, and also understand how to share and preach Krishna consciousness using Shiva as a agency. Um, so, okay, I'm just, going to get right into it because I have a presentation. I'll be having some slides for visual effect and be basically taking you a little bit on a journey here of some intimate connections with Srila Prabhupada and Lord Shiva, Bhaktisiddhanta and Lord Shiva, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Shiva. And in the process, we will be exploring exactly how does Shiva Mahadev connect to Krishna Bhakti. I mean, we're devotees of Krishna, we're aspiring devotees of Krishna. So why do we even celebrate Shiva Ratri? Why do we even want to talk about Shiva? It seems like another category of a spiritual topic. But believe me, there's all kinds of connections, and I'll be connecting some dots. You'll see as the presentation goes on that that are rarely discussed. So I hope you can follow along with me. And of course, I hope I'll be stimulating some intellectual curiosity or some questions and answers or some reflections to help the whole conversation progress. So, okay, let me just bring up my, okay. Let me ask you, can you see this now? Madhvadayata, can you see this?
Yes, we can see that perfectly well. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to the first one. So, okay. Okay, so this is a quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4th canto, 24th verse, 24th chapter, 30th verse, where Prabhupada says, it is said, Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu. Lord Shiva is the best of all devotees. Therefore, all devotees of Lord Krishna are also devotees of Lord Shiva. Okay, well, this is basic fundamental knowledge. And some of this was covered this morning. But what's interesting is the way Prabhupada phrases this, that yes, we're devotees of Krishna, but we're also devotees of Shiva. And to me, that statement is kind of like a sutra. It's like a very terse statement that can be dissected and looked at from various angles of vision and understood. So this is what we're going to be going over today. How does that actually work? How is, if I can use the word Shiva consciousness without getting into trouble, how is Shiva consciousness related to Krishna consciousness? Okay, now here, I'm presenting something from my god brother's book. My god brother is Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhu, disciple of Prabhupada, and he lives in Vrindavan. And he's also a very good artist, and he's put together one book. And this is just one page, and I put it into a slide. And let me just read this so that we can go over it. I need to move this in order to make this work. Okay. So, okay, Gorgovinda Swami shared a very confidential conversation with a few of his godbrothers, how once Lord Shiva asked Srila Prabhupada that he had been traveling all over the world preaching, but had never visited Bhuvaneshwar. And Bhuvaneshwar is known to be the initial place of the Bhagavatam recitation. Lord Shiva instructed Srila Prabhupada to come and stay in Bhuvaneshwar and work on the Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada accepted the order from Lord Shiva and visited Bhuvaneshwar in January 1977. So this is a fascinating little piece of information that a lot of devotees are not aware of. I'm sharing it tonight. This is Shiva Ratri. Somehow or other, Prabhupada had some kind of a vision or communication with Lord Shiva, where Lord Shiva is inviting Prabhupada to go to Bhuvaneshwar. And why Bhuvaneshwar? Bhuvaneshwar, it says here, is the place known to be the initial place of the Bhagavatam recitation. Now, some devotees don't know this, and again, I'll be going over this, I guess. I'll have to explain some things that are not so well known. And I'll explain this little story without spending too much time. The Bhagavatam was first spoken by Lord Shiva to Parvati under a mango tree in Bhuvaneshwar. And it's described that at that time, there was a parrot. It's actually Radharani's parrot came and actually was listening to the recitation of waiting for, like, she wants to go to the 10th canto and get to the real essence of the Bhagavatam Katha. And in the process of just waiting and listening to the Bhagavatam being spoken by Lord Shiva, she started nodding out. She started sleeping. But the parrot that was in the tree, actually, this is a very important parrot. This is Radharani's parrot. And this parrot was listening in on the recitation. And Lord Shiva was basically in a trance, going into his samadhi trance, meditating on Krishna and the Bhagavatam. And he was not even aware so much of what was happening, that Parvati was nodding out. But the parrot was basically going, as Parvati was prior, doing like that. So Lord Shiva kept on reciting the Bhagavatam, not knowing even that Parvati had fallen asleep. So at a certain point, Shiva realizes what's going on. He starts chasing the parrot because the parrot he didn't think was qualified to actually hear the Bhagavatam. And he didn't want the parrot to repeat what he had heard. So the story goes, he chased the parrot all the way to the Himalayas to where Vyasadeva was. And the parrot, and this parrot's name is Shuka, so you may know where I'm going with this. The parrot, Shuka, flew into the mouth of the wife of Vyasadeva, somehow or other made it into the womb of Vyasadeva, and that parrot became born as Shukadev, the actual reciter of the Bhagavatam. So that story is there in one of the Puranas. It's an interesting story, but the issue is the first recitation of the Bhagavatam is in Bhuvaneshwara, Shiva to Parvati. Okay? So, okay, so how do okay, let me go to the next slide then. Oh, here's a slide given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, is a quote from him, that, and let me just read it. In the consideration of pure Vaishnavas, Sri Bhuvaneshwar Shambhu is most dear to Krishna and is therefore non-different from Krishna. The Rupa Nuga Vaishnavas consider Sri Bhuvaneshwar Lingaraj to be the form of Sri Gopalini Shakti and pray to him for the service of the divine young couple, Sri Radha Govinda.
Apologies, Ramanath Sukha Prabhu. We can't see the slide.
You can't see the slide. Okay, why not? What happened?
Screen share, please.
I did screen share. Where do I go to screen share? Hare Krishna. Oh, here it is. Excuse me for this. Screen share again. Okay, now you're able to see a slide now. Let me put on the slide. Let me do it this way. I'm going to do it differently. Go like this. Oh, oops. If I can make it big. Okay, let me just do it this way. Oh, it's not big though.
I think we can see the full, you need to go on the presentation mode.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. There it goes.
Yes, that's good. Thank
Okay,
you.
but if I'm in the presentation mode, then how do I stop sharing or go to, I just go to the next slide. It'll
Yes,
be okay.
just keep the slideshow.
I'll
on.
just keep a slideshow. So
Thank you.
okay, and okay, you'll see me talking down here in the
Yes, on the
smooth corner.
gallery panel.
So that'll
yes.
be okay. That would be okay. We'll work it out. So this is an interesting point where Bhaktisiddhanta was talking about the significance of Lingaraj in Bhuvaneshwar. And I'm going to be talking about Lingaraj and Bhuvaneshwar and making that connection to Vrindavan, actually. So Lingaraj, he is a very special deity. In India, many of you know that there's 12 Jyotirlingams, very special temples in India, considered to be the main temples to Lord Shiva. And on Shiva Ratri, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people go to have darshan at these Lingaraj, the Jyotirlingam temples. Now, you would think that Lingaraj in Bhuvaneshwar is one of those Jyotirlingams, but he's not. He's Lingaraj. Lingaraj, I mean, he's the king of all the lingos. So he has a very special place in the hierarchy of Lord Shiva in India. So today's Shivaratri, we're going to focus on Lingaraj, the king of lingas. So who is this Lingaraj? He is actually connected in a very interesting way to Chaitanya Vaishnavism. Not only is he the Shiva deity that is manifest to be the Dikpala or protector for Jagannath Puri, he was the Shiva deity or the deity that represents Shiva that spoke the Bhagavatam, and he is considered to be half Shiva and half Vishnu. It's called Harihara. Hari is Vishnu, Hara is Shiva. And that connects to another conception that we've all heard about in Krishna consciousness, but sometimes it causes a lot of confusion. And that's related to who is Advaita Acharya. Advaita Acharya, we know, is Sadashiva. Now, Sadashiva, it was explained this morning very nicely, but just kind of a brief introduction to who is Sadashiva. This is original Shiva. This is the Shiva in the spiritual world, the Shiva from which all other Shivas manifest. So Lingaraj is Sadashiva, Harihara combination, which makes him basically equal to Advaita Acharya. These are special manifestations of Shiva. And it was Advaita Acharya as Sadashiva in his compassion who invited Lord Chaitanya to come to the mature world and introduce the Yuga Dharma of the age. So, we see how Shiva's making these connections now in relationship to Krishna Bhakti. Specifically, Sadashiva, Lingaraj is Harihara, and also we'll see now I'll go to the next slide. Now, this is a slide of a well-known prayer that is in honor and glorification of Gopeshwar Mahadev in Vrindavan. Now, the connection to Lingaraj and Bhuvaneshwar is fascinating, because when Bhaktisiddhanta came to Bhuvaneshwar in 1922, as soon as he got off the train, it was there in Bhuvaneshwar, he chanted this prayer. And when he went to the Lingaraj temple, he chanted this prayer. But this prayer is not to Lingaraj. The prayer is to Gopeshwar Mahadev in Vrindavan. But although I don't have any like reference material, I'm sure Bhaktisiddhanta understood that connection, that Gopeshwar Mahadev in Vrindavan is Sadashiva, actually Sadashiva. Lingaraj in Bhuvaneshwar is Sadashiva. Advaita Acharya is Sadashiva. In fact, in Vrindavan, on the appearance day of Advaita Acharya, all the sadhus and pandas and Matajis living, the Brajabasis, they like to visit the Gopeshwar Mahadev temple on Advaita Prabhu's appearance day, Advaita Acharya's appearance day, because they know that connection. They know Gopeshwar Mahadev is Sadashiva. And Sadashiva, properly understood, is not Shiva, it's Vishnu. Shiva Tattva is very complex, and I'm going to make it complex, but what can I do? It is what it is. Generally, devotees are taught to separate this understanding of Vishnu Tattva and Shiva Tattva, Vishnu and Shiva. We understand they're similar, but it's the analogy of milk and yogurt. It's the analogy of Achincha Beta Beta Tattva, inconceivable simultaneous oneness and difference. So generally we understand Shiva that way. But when it comes to Sadashiva or Harihara, there's no difference. That particular aspect of Shiva is non-different from Vishnu. But it gets confusing because we see, like devotees who have been to Vrindavan, you go there and you go for a darshan of Gopeshwar Mahadev, and it's a Shiva lingam. It looks like Shiva. Or you go to Lingaraj in Bhuvaneshwar, it's a Shiva lingam. It doesn't look like Vishnu, but it is. That's the distinction that devotees need to try and understand, this distinction between Sadashiva from regular Shiva, you could say, or Rudra, that expansions in the material world. Sadashiva is the same as Vishnu. And later on, if I have time, I'm going to get into another manifestation of Sadashiva that Prabhupada describes. It's also relevant, but in a different way. And that is the Shiva from the Bhagavatam pastime of the churning of the milk ocean. And everyone is waiting for the nectar, but the first thing that comes out is not nectar, but poison. And then everyone goes to Vishnu. What do we do now? There's poison everywhere. It's threatening the whole universe. And Lord Vishnu said, no, you just ask Shiva. He'll take care of it. Now that specific Shiva in that Leela pastime, Prabhupada explains in the purport in the Bhagavatam, that same Shiva, that Shiva is Sadashiva also. It's Sadashiva. Again, it's complicated. We see pictures of Lord Shiva, taking the poison and drinking it. Devotee artists have made pictures of this for the Bhagavatam. But the key thing is to, if you understand him as Sadashiva, even though it looks like Shiva, it's absolutely 100% non-different from Vishnu. So back to this verse, Vrindavana Vinipate Jaya Soma Soma Mole Sanaka Sanandana Sanatana Naradeja Gopishvara Vrajavilasi Yugangri Padme Prema Yayacha Nirupari Nama Namaste. And the translation is, O gatekeeper of Vrindavan, O Soma, all glories unto you. O you whose forehead is decorated with the moon and who is worshipable by Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanatana, Narada, and other great sages, O Gopeshwar Mahadev, desiring that you bestow upon me divine love for the lotus feet of Sri Sri Radha Govinda, who performs joyous pastimes in Vrajadam, I offer my respects to you again and again. So this Gopeshwar Mahadev deity in Vrindavan, Prabhupada mentions him twice in his purports to the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada didn't emphasize this deity, but as the decades go on, as the years and decades go on after Prabhupada's demise, we're realizing that just how important this Gopeshwar Mahadev temple is and the deity is. He's the Dikpala. He allows access into Vrindavan. And actually, Rupa Goswami gives another instruction in his book. It's called Mathura Mahatmya. And if any devotees out there are going to Vrindavan want to follow this instruction, I think it's very practical too. That first, even before going to Vrindavan, there's a temple in Mathura called Bhuteshwar Mahadev. These are ancient deities of Lord Shiva, said to have been established by Vrajanab, the great grandson of Krishna. So they go back thousands of years, 5,000 years. So the idea is you go to Bhuteshwar Mahadev first in Mathura. He basically frees you from all your sins and mentalities that will block you from actually entering into Vrindavan in a correct mood. Then once entering Vrindavan, you offer your respects to Gopeshwar Mahadev. You pray to actually achieve the proper Vraja mood. You pray, this is actually how devotees should pray to Gopeshwar Mahadev or Shiva in general, to advance in Krishna Prema. Just like tonight's Shiva Ratri, we're asking Lord Shiva, please help us advance in our Krishna Bhakti. But specifically in Vrindavan, that Gopeshwar Mahadev functions in a certain way. We all know that Shiva's a destroyer. And we sometimes think, oh, he's waiting around for the end of the, he's waiting around for the end of the universe so he can destroy the universe. Well, certainly that's one function. But for the devotees, he's a destroyer of three basic things, and we can pray for him to destroy these things for us. And those are material desires. Material desires and Krishna Bhakti don't go well together. He's the destroyer of ignorance. Actually, Shiva Mahadev or Gopeshwar Mahadev, he's acting as a Vaishnava guru. So he'll destroy our ignorance. Om Agyan Timirandasha. And even more importantly, Prabhupada explains in another purport in the Bhagavatam, Shiva Mahadev is the destroyer of ahankara, or false ego. So this is how he functions. And if you actually have this right mentality and intent in entering Vrindavan, you'll be able to actually connect with the Vrajamuda Bhakti. Your realizations will become more profound. And it's all through the agency of Lord Shiva. And if you don't make that connection with Lord Shiva, then it's basically, you're in Vrindavan, you're in the Holy Dham, but you're there like a tourist. You're there, but you're not there. So these are some interesting things. So this prayer, let me get back to this prayer. Why is Bhaktisiddhanta chanting this prayer to Gopeshwar Mahadev when he's visiting Lingaraj in Bhuvaneshwara? He's making that connection. Lingaraj and Gopeshwar Mahadev, they're the same. It's the same function, it's the same personality, it's the same deity, and ultimately you can make the connection because it's Sadashiva, it's the same as Advaita Acharya. So, Lingaraj temple in Bhuvaneshwar, and this is what I'm going to be talking about. This is going to be the main focus of my discussion, is when Mahaprabhu went to this Lingaraj temple, what happened? We already got some inclination that Prabhupada had a unique relationship with Lingaraj. Bhaktisiddhanta also had a unique relationship with Lingaraj. And this ultimately comes from Mahaprabhu's connection with Lingaraj. Let me just read this quickly from the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 9, 360. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally visited temples in various holy places. Wherever he visited, he immediately exhibited his ecstatic love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When a Vaishnava visits the temple of a demigod, his vision of that demigod is different from the vision of the impersonalists and Mayavadis. The Brahma Samhita supports this. A Vaishnava's visit to the temple of Lord Shiva, now I can't see it, I have to move it, for example, is different from a non-devotee's visit. So Lord Chaitanya set a certain example. Yes, you can visit temples of Lord Shiva, especially prominent temples in India, but the mentality has to be different. So here we have Lord Chaitanya at Lingaraj. Now at Lingaraj, there's a certain phenomenon that happened that's practically unprecedented. And in my research and trying to understand Lord Shiva in relationship to Krishna Bhakti, I've been trying to understand this and what Prabhupada said about this. And that is that at the Lingaraj temple, Lord Chaitanya, in his darshan of Lingaraj and meditating on the importance of Lingaraj as Harihara in the first recitation of the Bhagavatam and as a Dikpala for Jagannath. In other words, Lord Chaitanya was on his way to have darshan of Jagannath, but first you have to get that permission of Lord Shiva. And he's meditating on all this, and he goes into these, how can you really describe it? Transcendental ecstasies, dancing and chanting in front of Lingaraj. And he has with him one of his assistants, his name is Murari Gupta. And Lord Chaitanya spontaneously recites 8 prayers in glorification of Lord Shiva. 8 prayers, and it's called the Shivastakam. Now, some of you may have heard of Shivastakam. When I talk to devotees about it, most devotees have not heard. The Shivastakam was published 12 years ago in Back to Godhead magazine, but there was not a lot of information on what it is, these 8 prayers of Lord Shiva. We're all aware of Shikshastakam, the prayers of Lord Chaitanya, Shikshastakam, but there's another set of prayers. Now, Lord Chaitanya did not write it. He recited it spontaneously in his ecstatic mood. And because Murari Gupta was there, and Murari Gupta was an Ayurvedic physician, and he was an assistant to Lord Chaitanya. We'll talk about him a little bit more. But what happened was Murari Gupta, as Lord Chaitanya was singing or reciting these prayers, Murari Gupta was recording them in his journal. He had a diary. And it's that diary that's one of the main sources of information, actually, for Chaitanya Charitamrita. But here's this thing that I cannot answer, and I've asked this question to many devotees. Why is it that Srila Prabhupada never introduced us to the Shivastakam prayers of Lord Chaitanya? I don't have an answer for that. But in my research, nowhere in Prabhupada's books, in his lectures, in his room conversations, morning walks, can't find it anywhere where Prabhupada even mentions it. Yet, it is an important part of our Chaitanya Vaishnava history. It happened. It is history. It is there recorded in Murari Gupta's diary. So who's Murari Gupta? As an incarnation of Hanuman, Murari Gupta is as dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Hanuman is to Lord Ramchandra. Born into a lineage of Ayurvedic doctors, Murari Gupta followed that profession, but because of his elevated spiritual potencies, he also cured the spiritual diseases of his patients along with their physical ailments. Murari Gupta pleased Gauranga with melodious chanting of the Bhagavata. So Murari Gupta is a very confidential devotee of Lord Chaitanya. But what's interesting, he was a Ram Bhakta. Marai Gupta, in his internal identity, in his intrinsic identity, is Hanuman manifesting in Chaitanya Leela. Hanuman manifesting in Chaitanya Leela. And just as Hanuman is the best devotee of Ramchandra, in one sense, Hanuman is the best devotee of Chaitanya. It's a really interesting connection. And the intrinsic identity of Hanumanji is as the 11th Rudra, or Shiva. So I hope you're following this. I'm trying to connect the dots, so to speak. Who is Hanuman? He's actually Shiva. And that manifestation of Hanuman manifests in Chaitanya Leela as Marai Gupta. And Marai Gupta, confidential associate with Mahaprabhu, is traveling with him on his trip to have darshan of Jagannath. And he's there in the Lingaraj temple, and he's watching Lord Chaitanya go through these ecstasies and spontaneously chanting the Shivastakam prayers. That Marai Gupta is Shiva recording the Shivastakam, if that makes sense. Now, when I started like putting these dots together, it kind of like, it's just like, wow, this is really interesting. Why didn't Prabhupada cover this? Anyway, I don't have an answer for it. I've asked various senior devotees, gurus, sannyasis. No one's been able to satisfy me. So that remains a mystery. Certain things with Shiva Tattva are always going to be mysterious. That's just the way it is. Okay, now here's something also interesting. This is from a lecture in Srimad Bhagavatam in Los Angeles in 1974. Prabhupada says, Arjuna's chariot was with flag marked with a Hanumanji. So Arjuna kept upon him Vrajnangaji, Hanuman, because he considered Hanuman his guru. Now, again, I've done research in this. I've never found where Prabhupada said like that before, that Arjuna considered Hanuman to be his guru. We know from the Bhagavad Gita that Hanuman is there on the flag of Arjuna's chariot, and Prabhupada has amazing things about that, how it brought all auspiciousness and victory. But never heard this part where he says in this lecture that Hanuman is Arjuna's guru. So Arjuna's guru, you can make an inference, is Shiva. Hanumanji at the Bhaktivedanta manor is Shiva. So sometimes the devotees, we think, oh, we're Krishna bhaktas, we're not Shiva bhaktas. But in Bhaktivedanta manor, you've been worshiping Shiva for years, for decades, as Hanumanji. Here's another interesting purport I just wanted to put up here and discuss briefly from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto. One should worship the Rudra incarnations of Lord Shiva if he wants to be a great hero. So anyone who wants to be a hero, you want to be a superhero, well, go to Bhaktivedanta manor and pray to Hanumanji, and he will make you a great hero. Why is that? Because he's actually Shiva. Okay, now I'm putting up this slide in a purport, making this connections that as Krishna devotees, yes, we're focusing on Krishna, Radha and Krishna, but we incorporate Ram Leela and Chaitanya Leela, and there's a specific form called Sadbhuj. Let me just read this quickly, and we'll go over this. So in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:19:8, purport is, okay, I'm just continuing a purport there. It says, all the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but especially Lord Ramchandra, Lord Krishna, and later Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, delivered many of the living entities present before them. Indeed, almost all of them. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is therefore represented in the sixth arm form of Sadbhuj Murti, which is a combination of Lord Ramchandra, Lord Krishna, and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The best purpose of human life can be fulfilled by worshiping the Sadbhuj Murti, the form of the Lord with 6 arms, 2 arms of Ramchandra, 2 arms of Krishna, and 2 arms of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, I'm putting this up here simply to make this connection, is what I'm doing with Ram Leela at the Bhuvaneshwar Lingaraj temple, because Marai Gupta is Hanuman serving his dearmost Ramchandra as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Leela. And that's where all these amazing things happen, there at Lingaraj. Okay, now, let me just read this and I'll explain it why I have it here. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness now has its World Center in Navadvip, Mayapur. The managers of this center should see that 24 hours a day, there is chanting of the holy names of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, with the addition, Hari Haraya Nama Krishna, Yadavaya Namaha. For this song was a favorite of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that's coming from the Adi Leela Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that after these ecstatic experiences of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Marai Gupta recording the Shivastakam, well, they still have to go to Jagannath Puri. So the road going to Puri, I'm not sure, it's 30 kilometers, it's a ways off. On that road going to Jagannath Puri, Mahaprabhu is chanting and dancing. He's just had the darshan of Lingaraj. Now he's going to have the darshan of Jagannath, and he's chanting, Hare Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Namaha Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. So Hare Haraya Nama Krishna. Hari Hara. Hari Hara. This is referring to Lingaraj. Hari Hara. Hari Hara, you could say it's actually a name of Vishnu, of Krishna. Hari Hara. So as Mahaprabhu just left Lingaraj having the darshan of Lingaraj, who is Hari Hara, half Shiva, half Vishnu, then he's chanting Hari Haraya Nama Krishna. And Prabhupada says this mantra should also be chanted in Mayapur. Of course, we chant it, everywhere. It's such a wonderful prayer and song. But specifically, chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, chanting of Hari Haraya Nama Krishna, they go together. And part of that inspiration came from this experience at Lingaraj. Okay, this is my last slide. This is a little off this story of Lingaraj, the exclusive pastimes of Lord Shiva. I'm giving this information because there's so many pastimes of Lord Shiva. This is one of the famous ones in the Bhagavatam, the 8th canto. So the story of Lord Shiva drinking poison from the churning of the milk ocean is part of a much larger narrative from the Srimad Bhagavatam 8th canto, 7th chapter. The demigods and the asuras work conjointly to produce the nectar of immortality, but the very first thing that manifests was intense poison that threatened all of humanity. So this poison, I want to bring this up because this form of Shiva, of drinking the poison from the ocean, I mentioned just briefly, he's also Sadashiva. So these Sadashiva connections are special. Try and learn how to make the distinction Sadashiva and regular Shiva. So the Shiva that drinks the ocean of poison, it's Vishnu. Sure looks like Shiva, but it's Vishnu. The Shiva at Lingaraj, that's Sadashiva, Vishnu. The Shiva that's at Gopishwar Mahadev in Vrindavan, Sadashiva. The Dvaitacharya, also Sadashiva, the original Shiva. So the reason I'm bringing this up is to make the connection that many times devotees, they have this projection on Shiva Mahadev as a Mayavadi, basically. And why is that? Because Shiva Mahadev manifests or advented or became Shankaracharya, and we know Shankaracharya taught Advaita Vedanta all over India, and it was the influence that was established by Shankaracharya that Ramanujacharya had to come, Madhvacharya had to come. Eventually, it led the way for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to establish the teachings of Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva. Achintya Beda Abeda Tattva, inconceivably, simultaneously oneness and difference. And that is the quintessential essence of the progression of Indian theological, philosophical thought culminates in Lord Chaitanya. So, this manifestation of Shiva drinking the poison is symbolic of drinking the poison of Mayavad conceptions and Mayavad philosophy. And that's related to in another story in the Bhagavatam with Putana, the witch. Putana came to kill Krishna by Kamsa, and how did she do it? She smeared poison on her breast. And it's explained by our acharyas that Putana is symbolizing the false guru, the Mayavadi guru, who basically says, yes, you can worship Krishna, but ultimately we want to kill Krishna and become Krishna. This is Mayavad. So this symbolism of Shiva drinking this poison from the milk ocean, we don't want the poison, we want the nectar, the Amrit. So the nectar is Krishna Bhakti, service to Krishna. The poison is Mayavad concepts. So many followers of Shiva, devotees of Shiva, Shaivites, they're contaminated with this Mayavad poison. And it's up to us as followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to clarify that with them. We have to be clear ourselves and then clarify it with others that actually Lord Shiva is a Vaishnava. Lord Shiva is meditating on Sankarshan. Ultimately, Lord Shiva is meditating on Radha and Krishna. Ultimately, Lord Shiva is meditating on Radharani. Now, how can I say that? There's a certain prayer in Vrindavan, the Brajabasis sing it. Again, Prabhupada didn't talk about it, but it's there. It's part of Vrindavan culture. Now, this prayer is sometimes even said to be the national anthem of Vrindavan, so to speak. It is sometimes described as the heart of Vrindavan, and it's called the Radha Kripa Kataksha Stotram. And these are prayers chanted by Lord Shiva to Parvati. Again, Shiva to Parvati, this connection, Shiva to Parvati is very powerful. And it's prayers in glorification of Radharani and getting the merciful glance of Radharani so we can advance in our devotion to Krishna, ultimately Radha and Krishna. So Lord Shiva, he is the topmost Vaishnava. He teaches all levels of Krishna Bhakti. But we have to understand him as a Vaishnava and not see him as a Mayavadi or someone who promotes. He's confusing. Lord Shiva is full of paradoxes and contradictions, not easily understood, full of mysteries. Even with what I'm telling you tonight, there's lots of mysteries. I cannot tell you why Prabhupada didn't cover some of this material, but he didn't. It's part of our Vaishnava heritage. It's part of our Chaitanya Vaishnava heritage. So I think I've said enough. I hope I've stimulated some of your thinking processes and hope there's some interesting questions that we'll try and stick to the points I'm discussing tonight, although there's all kinds of questions when it comes to Shiva Tattva and Lord Shiva and how that relates to Krishna Bhakti. So, okay. Madhva, or whoever's sponsoring, if we can just open it up now for questions and answers, I think it's fine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ramanath Sukha, for taking us through that really awe-inspiring, journey of really.
It's a journey. Yeah, it was a journey on Shiva Ratri. I hope I didn't lose everyone because it's difficult.
Yeah, there's a lot to capture here, but we have some questions.
Yes,
quite a few questions actually.
Questions and answers.
And please do keep them coming through as well, either to myself or to Snehal Prabhu. So I'll start off with one question that was asked about, I think you mentioned it in the first few slides. The question was, thank you so much for all these wonderful pastimes. And in specific to this question is they're referring to the parrot pastime that you mentioned to have happened in Bhubaneswar. And they've understood that this has also happened in Kedarnath. How do we reconcile the different accounts?
It also happened what? Say it again.
In Kedarnath.
I don't know about the Kedarnath. I mean, what also happened? The reciting of the
Pastime
Prabhupada?
that you mentioned about Shukha.
I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm sorry.
I'll let that person
Yeah,
rephrase a question. Okay, so this question is quite long. The next one is a three-part question.
okay.
I'll ask in
Try my
bits.
best.
I'll ask in bits.
I'm not a scholar, not an expert, but I have been studying these things. I've had my own personal kind of, you know, interactions with Shiva, you could say. So it's kind of driven me to find out more what Prabhupada has said, what the Vaishnavacharyas have said, but I'm not an expert. I'm still learning. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so the first part of the question is that in the Vayu Purana, there is a description of Sadashiva in one of the Vaikuntha planets. That Sadashiva is a direct expansion of Lord Krishna's form for pastimes. It is said that Sadashiva, Lord
For
Shambhu,
pastimes. Yeah, go ahead.
is an expansion from the Sadashiva in the Vaikuntha planets, Lord Vishnu himself, and that his consort Mahamaya is an expansion of Ramadevi or Lakshmi.
Ramadevi.
It's Ramadevi.
Yeah, the accent is on that last day. So distinction, not Ramadevi, Ramadevi.
Ramadevi.
Go ahead.
And this is actually from Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela 679.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is that isn't the Sadashiva who looks like Shiva Shambhu Sadashiva as opposed to looking like Vishnu? Because we understand that there are two Sadashivas, the Sadashiva and Vaikuntha who looks like a Vishnu Murti and who has his own Vaikuntha planet, and then the Sadashiva, the Lord Shambhu, who is in his Mahesh Dham and looks like Lord Shiva.
Look, when I get back to Vaikuntha, I'll let you know the answer to that. I'm sorry. These things are kind of like way over my head. But yeah, it's interesting thinking and interesting thoughts. Exactly how does he look like there as Sadashiva? The point I'm making that when we go to Lingaraj or Gopeshwar Mahadev and it looks like a Shiva Lingam, in our consciousness, we should be thinking, give it a little twist. Oh, it's actually Vishnu because it's Sadashiva. And when we see these pictures of Lord Shiva drinking the poison, looks like Shiva. Looks like any other Shiva picture I've seen. But actually, because Prabhupada says it's Sadashiva, again, it's kind of like we have to make this adjustment. It's not the milk yogurt analogy. It's actually Vishnu. Sure looks like Shiva, but it's Vishnu. What can I say? It's confusing. I know when I started like contemplating, I was also like, what's going on here? Am I going crazy? But this is part of the mystery of Krishna consciousness, the mystery of Shiva in relationship to Krishna consciousness. Ultimately, it's the relationship of Achinta Beta Beta Tattva in Lord Chaitanya and this whole philosophy of inconceivable oneness and difference that manifests certainly through this understanding of Shiva. It manifests through the understanding of Radha and Krishna, how Radha and Krishna are one and the same, yet they're different. We're one with Krishna, yet we're different. So this whole Achinta Beta Beta Tattva concept is also mystical. Achinta basically means mystical. Achinta means it can't really be easily understood. It's part of Achinta Shakti. And for devotees of Krishna, we have to accept that this energy of Krishna, this Achinta energy, is a difficult one to really grasp. We may never grasp it fully, but yet we're trying to. I'm trying to describe Shiva Tattva, knowing that who am I to describe something as advanced as Shiva Tattva? Srila Jiva Goswami, he says in one of his Sandarbhas, there's two tattvas. They're difficult for the devotees to understand. They're complex and just hard to grab hold of. And that is Shiva Tattva and Guru Tattva. And interestingly enough, Shiva Tattva, Guru Tattva are interrelated. I just gave you that one quote where Prabhupada says that Arjuna sees Hanuman as his guru, and Hanuman is Shiva. It's this interrelationship. Lord Shiva is the topmost Vaishnava. He acts as a guru. If we want him to, we can bring him into our lives and understanding as a guru. So Guru Tattva, Shiva Tattva, they're interrelated. It's complex. It is what it is. I'm trying to delve into this. I'm trying to ask a lot of my God brothers, God sisters, anyone that I can talk to about these things who's also done research in this area. And yeah, it's an ongoing. I don't know what I want to say. It's a struggle or concern, but I think it's an area of interest that the devotee should try and understand better. That Shiva can help us advance in Krishna consciousness. How does that work? As Prabhupada said in the very beginning, that one quote, every devotee of Krishna is also a devotee of Shiva. Well, if we take that literally, we have to figure it out. How are we devotees of Shiva? What does it really mean to be a devotee of Shiva in relationship to Krishna? Just like now, I was actually having a little conversation with Nilamani about this, who gave the Bhagavatam class at the Manor this morning. It seems that there's an opening up to Shiva Ratri in ISKCON and to discussions of Lord Shiva in ISKCON. I see it as a progressive, positive thing. As devotees are maturing and understanding more and more what Prabhupada left us, the legacy Prabhupada left us, we see that we also have to accommodate Lord Shiva to some way, shape, or form. We're not saying how to do that, but it's like this is a part of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so okay, we still got plenty of time for questions and answers. Any other things? I hope
Sure.
I hope devotees have something to say, that I'm not the only one talking tonight. This is Shiva Ratri. Please say something in glorification of Lord Shiva.
They've all really enjoyed your class, actually, and so much that you had to share as well. The other question was, because it's Shivratri this evening, could you please say something about Lord Shiva's wedding, which is celebrated on this Mahashivratri? Is this connected to the pastime of Shiva Sati in, Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 4?
Look, there's so much information about Lord Shiva there in various Puranas and so many references. I have a tendency basically to stick to Prabhupada's books and what other Vaishnava acharyas have said about Lord Shiva. So when it comes to the marriage of Lord Shiva, I know there are many Shaivites and other, people coming from an Indian background or Hindu background, if I want to use that word, that can know that much better than I do. And I know Shivaratri is supposed to be the celebration not only of the marriage of Shiva and Parvati, but I've also heard that it is somehow or other connected with the manifestation of Shiva, also like Shiva's birthday. And I've never really understood it, exactly how that works. I've never really fully understood about the Sati Shiva connection, and how, because Sati committed suicide and then she was reborn as Parvati, and Parvati committed, performed a lot of austerities to win over Lord Shiva as her husband. It's just one of those things that I need to do more research on. Perhaps someone who's listening tonight can say something that would be more clarifying than I can give in that regard. Anyone wants to say anything? We can try and make it interactive. Like I said, I don't want to be the only one talking. If someone wants to contribute, please do in answering that question.
I believe you can off-mute yourself if anyone did want to say anything.
Hello, Ramanath Sukha ji. Namaste. This is Shiva Guru. On this auspicious occasion,
Yes.
Am I allowed to recite 108 names of Shivaji? Please.
Perhaps, but let's wait for that. Okay, we got some time left here. Let's 108 names of Shivaji. There's so many ways to, I could have recited all 8 prayers of Shivastakam, but I wanted to keep it short. I didn't want to get into all these.
Yeah,
details.
this hardly
Yeah.
takes 2-3 minutes, to be honest.
Okay, okay.
Om Sadravana, Om Krishnaya Namaha. Om Shivaya Namaha, Om Maheswaraya Namaha, Om Sambhave Namaha, Om Pinakine Namaha, Om Sasisekaraya Namaha, Om Vamadevaya Namaha, Om Virupakshaya Namaha, Om Kapardhine Namaha, Om Nilalohitaya Namaha, Om Sankaraya Namaha, Om Solapaniya Namaha, Om Katwangine Namaha, Om Vishnu Vallabhaya Namaha, Om Sipivistaya Namaha, Om Ambikanadaya Namaha, Om Sri Kantaya Namaha, Om Bhaktavasalaya Namaha, Om Bhavaya Namaha, Om Sarvaya Namaha, Om Trilokeshaya Namaha, Om Sitikantaya Namaha, Om Sivapriyaya Namaha, Om Ugraya Namaha, Om Kapaline Namaha, Om Kaumarine Namaha, Om Andakara Sudhana Namaha, Om Gangadharaya Namaha, Om Lavatakshaya Namaha, Om Kalakalaya Namaha, Om Krupanidhiye Namaha, Om Bhimaya Namaha, Om Parasastaya Namaha, Om Rugapanaya Namaha, Om Jatadharaya Namaha, Om Kailasavasine Namaha, Om Kavachane Namaha, Om Kathoraya Namaha, Om Tripurantakaya Namaha, Om Rushankaya Namaha, Om Vrishabharudhaya Namaha, Vrishabharudhaya Namaha, Om Bhasmodulita Vigrahaya Namaha, Om Samapriyaya Namaha, Somapriyaya Namaha, Om Sarvamayaya Namaha, Om Trayimurtaye Namaha, Om Aniswaraya Namaha, Om Sarvanyaya Namaha, Om Paramatmane Namaha, Om Soma Suryagni Lochanaya Namaha, Om Havishay Namaha, Om Yajnamayaya Namaha, Om Somaya Namaha, Om Panchavakshraya Namaha, Om Sadasivaya Namaha, Om Vishweshwaraya Namaha, Om Virabhadraya Namaha, Om Gananathaya Namaha, Om Prajapataye Namaha, Om Hiranyaretase Namaha, Om Duddashaya Namaha, Om Girishaya Namaha, Om Girishaya Namaha, Om Nagahaya Namaha, Om Bhujangabhushanaya Namaha, Om Bhargaya Namaha, Om Giridhanvane Namaha, Om Giripraya Namaha, Om Krityavasane Namaha, Om Purarataye Namaha, Om Bhagavate Namaha, Om Pramatadapaya Namaha, Om Mrutyunjaya Namaha, Om Sukshmatanave Namaha, Om Jagadvyapine Namaha, Om Jagadgurave Namaha, Om Yomakesaya Namaha, Om Mahasenaya Namaha, Om Charu Vikramaya Namaha, Om Rudraya Namaha, Om Bhutapataye Namaha, Om Sthanave Namaha, Om Ahedviddhaya Namaha, Om Digambaraya Namaha, Om Astamurtiye Namaha, Om Anekatmane Namaha, Om Satvikaya Namaha, Om Suddha Vigrahaya Namaha, Om Saswataya Namaha, Om Kandaparaswaya Namaha, Om Ajaya Namaha, Om Pasa Vimochakaya Namaha, Om Rudhaya Namaha, Om Paspatiye Namaha, Om Devaya Namaha, Om Mahadevaya Namaha, Om Avyaya Namaha, Om Haraye Namaha, Om Purusha Dantapide Namaha, Om Agraya Namaha, Avyagraya Namaha, Om Dakshodhara Haraya Namaha, Om Haraya Namaha, Om Bhaganatra Vidya Namaha, Avyaktaya Namaha, Om Sahasrakshaya Namaha, Om Sahasrapade Namaha, Om Apavarga Pradaya Namaha, Om Anantaya Namaha, Om Tarakaya Namaha, Om Paraveshraya Namaha, Om Sagrapnam, Om Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for letting me.
Thank you. Thank you. These
Thanks.
are all auspicious names of Lord Shiva. I understand. May they all bless us all to become pure devotees of Krishna. May we understand them in that relationship. And sometimes if we're chanting mantras without understanding what it means, like every one of those names has a meaning that could have been translated and gone over, but we don't have time, of course. But there is a principle in Krishna Bhakti called niyamagraha, that if we're doing things without understanding the meaning behind it, that's actually not good for Krishna consciousness. So chanting certainly the names of Lord Shiva is auspicious, but when we connect those names to understanding them in relationship to Krishna consciousness, then it becomes powerful and potent. So all those aspects, 108 names of Lord Shiva, wonderful. Lord Shiva is all auspicious, and may he allow us all to deepen our Krishna consciousness. Okay, Madhva, what about that question that you asked? Is anyone that wants to try and answer that about the marriage of Lord Shiva and Parvati?
I don't see anyone raising their hand so far, actually. Yeah,
Sometimes the person who asks the question knows the answer to the question. So who asked the question? Maybe they know.
Do you know the answer, Sachinanda Karuna Prabhu? I think we'll wait until, let me just carry on with the other questions. Why don't we
Yeah,
just
some
wait
other
and
question. Let's
see?
go on.
Okay, so this question actually about the pastime of the one that you mentioned about Kedarnath, about Bhuvaneshwar, where Lord
Bhuvaneshwar.
yes,
We're focusing
exactly.
on Bhuvaneshwar and Lingaraj.
Lingaraj, the question that I asked you at the beginning about the parrot pastime where Shuka actually goes to Kedarnath, that actually he heard that pastime in Bhuvaneshwar, but it was said that it would really happened in Kedarnath. So the reference that we have here was let me just get the question up.
I don't have my reference in front of me on that story, but I could bring it up sometime and maybe look at it a little closer where it actually came from.
So just for the audience, actually, let me just say what the pastime really happened was. So this is actually from Vrindavani in Birmingham. She's asking this question. So for centuries, we've heard that Lord Shiva led Parvati to Kedarnath to tell her about the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Shuka the parrot hides in the cave. At the same time, there's a pilgrimage taking place where they explain the different places Lord Shiva travels through to reach the cave. And this is where Parvati is eager to hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. But it's the first time you mentioned with Lingaraj, it's the first time that happened in Bhuvaneshwar, where actually Lord Shiva recites the Bhagavatam to Parvati as well. So how do we reconcile this?
I don't know, maybe a Chincha Beta Beta Tafa can reconcile that. What my understanding is, the Bhagavatam was recited underneath a mango tree. It's supposed to be a famous mango tree in Bhuvaneshwar. I don't think it's there anymore. And that is the first recitation of the Bhagavatam in Bhuvaneshwar. The Kedarnath connection, I just don't have any information on. I don't know how it works. So again, what can I say? I can't make a full reconciliation of that issue because I just don't know. Okay, I mean, my limits of knowledge when it comes to Shiva Tafa, I run out rather quick.
Okay, another question that was asked was, Lord Shiva chants japa or on Rudraksha. Can something be said about this? He chants the names of Ananta and Sankarsana on these beads, right?
Ananta and Sankarshan on Rudraksha?
Yes. Could you clarify on that, please?
Again, I mean, there's so much information about Shiva. I'm not a Shaivite. I don't know everything that's connected to Shiva. My focus is on trying to understand Shiva in relationship to Krishna Bhakti, Shiva in relationship to Lord Chaitanya, Shiva in relationship to Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta, as I connected it tonight, Shiva in relationship to preaching Krishna consciousness. I had a realization. Someone sent me a recording just yesterday, and I was listening to it this morning, of the Rudra Gita being chanted, and from the fourth canto. I forget which the chapter is. It's there with the story of the Prachetas, where the Prachetas became illumined in Krishna Bhakti by Lord Shiva. And so there's some prayers called the Rudra Gita. And they're not that long. It's a little over 50 prayers, I think, and it doesn't take that long to chant it. But I was thinking, wow, these prayers are so nice. Why not utilize those prayers for preaching purposes to get people interested in Bhagavad Gita? In other words, as I've understood it, Rudra Gita in a lot of ways can be understood as a synopsis of Bhagavad Gita, as the essence of Bhagavad Gita, but in a kind of condensed form. Now, sometimes if you present Bhagavad Gita to someone who's not really very philosophical or, willing to read a big book on philosophy, it's too daunting. But Rudra Gita is smaller. And for some people, I think it's going to be more accessible. So I'm thinking how actually Rudra Gita can be utilized for preaching purposes. The point is, Lord Shiva, like any Vaishnava guru, wants to teach Krishna consciousness. He wants to elevate people in Krishna consciousness. He wants, if you're really a follower of Lord Shiva, you'll be chanting Hare Krishna and practicing Bhakti Yoga. This is the real function of Lord Shiva as Vaishnava Guru, not some Shaivite conception in competition with Vishnu. Lord Chaitanya is explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita when he went to South India and he would witness these confrontations where they argue, Shaivites and the Vaishnavas. Basically, the Shaivites would bring out their Shiva Purana, the Vaishnavas would bring out their Vishnu Purana or the Bhagavatam, and they would start arguing. And Lord Chaitanya would just listen, he wouldn't say much. But then, when he was allowed to speak, he gave a simple analogy that really explains it all. Not quoting from this book or that book, he simply gave the analogy that when Vamanadev, he pushed his toe in the second step up through the edge of the universe, the second step of Vamana. And it's from there that the Bhagirath and the the Ganga River flows into the material universe. So Lord Chaitanya says that Lord Shiva takes that Ganges, the Ganga Ma, and it goes on his head. So that Ganges is the foot wash or the Charnamrita of Vishnu. So it's an indication of Shiva's supplicating himself to Vishnu by taking that on his head. So in a simple analogy, without getting into this Shastra or that Shastra, Lord Chaitanya was able to convince the Shaivites that, yeah, you're right. Vishnu is supreme. Vishnu is God. And Lord Shiva is his servant, is his devotee. See, that's simple. So I got a little off track there. What was the, you're talking about chanting on Rudrakshas? Yeah, so, I don't know. There's so many things I cannot answer in regard to Shiva. What I would like to focus on is like, how is Shiva relevant to Krishna Bhakti? Tonight, there's so many devotees, either new devotees or older devotees, trying to learn something about on Shiva Ratri. As I said before, I hope I don't get into trouble, it's talking about Shiva consciousness in relationship to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada never used the word Shiva consciousness, I know that. But there is an interrelationship between Shiva and Krishna. Specifically in Chaitanya Vaishnavism, we find that Lord Chaitanya did not reject Shiva, nor did he reject Durga in relationship to Krishna. It's not that we're Shaivites or Shaktas, but we can incorporate these Shiva, Shakti, or Shiva and Durga elements. When understood correctly, they help liberate us. When understood incorrectly, they'll keep us in the cycle of samsara. That's why the Bhagavad Gita stresses, and even Prabhupada stresses in most of his teachings when it comes to the demigods or Lord Shiva, don't go there. Because the tendency is to approach Lord Shiva for material benefits. Shiva is known as Ashutosh. He gives things very easily, and people, oh, well, let me just go to Lord Shiva and ask for any number of things. But the Bhagavad Gita explains over and over again, if you do that, then that's actually the less intelligent approach. Ultimately, it's Krishna who's allowing the demigods to give those benedictions anyway. The point is, if we understand Shiva correctly and approach him as a Vaishnava guru and make these connections, how does he function for a Krishna Bhakta? He can help us. We cannot enter Vrindavan without understanding Shiva, approaching Shiva, without approaching that Shiva factor. We can go to Vrindavan, but we can't enter Vrindavan. Ultimately, Lord Chaitanya came to give Vraj, the mood of Vraj Bhakti, the mood of Goloka Vrindavan. We are followers of Lord Chaitanya, We're not simply ordinary Vaishnavas in the sense of our destination being Vaikuntha, servants of Vishnu. Sometimes the analogy is given that the worship of Krishna in Vrindavan is like the worship of Krishna at home, where things are relaxed and intimate, whereas the worship of Vishnu is much more formal, and it's like the Supreme Personality of Godhead at work. Certain etiquette and formalities are there. It's a different mood. So as the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we're ultimately meant to understand what is this Vraja mood of bhakti. And that comes in many ways, but one of the important ways also is that really distinguishes Chaitanya Vaishnavism from other forms of Vaishnavism is Gopi Bhartu Bharakamalayor Dasa Das Anudas. We're learning how to become a servant of the servant of Krishna. So much so that actually we learn as we're advancing in Krishna consciousness that yes, I'm serving Krishna, I'm a devotee of Krishna, but the real thing is how to become a servant and a devotee of the devotees who are serving Krishna. That's more important. That's more important to help us advance in Krishna consciousness. And there's another famous a statement by, again, Lord Shiva to Parvati. I like this Shiva to Parvati. And we're talking about Shiva Ratri, it's the marriage of Shiva and Parvati. Anyway, another famous verse, Prabhupada will quote, Aradhanam Sarvesham Vishnu Aradhanam Param. That of all varieties of worship, the worship of Vishnu Aradhanam Param is supreme, because Shiva was asked by Parvati, what's the best form of worship? Okay, so out of all these different forms of worship, worship of Vishnu is supreme. But then, Tasmat Paritaram Devi Tadinam Samarchanam. But my dear Devi, my dear goddess, my dear wife, Parvati, even better than worship of Vishnu or Krishna is to worship that which is related to Krishna. And Prabhupada translates that as to worship the Vaishnava. In another place, Prabhupada quotes other verses that say that Krishna says that those who think they're my devotees are actually not my devotee. But those who are devotees of my devotees, they're my real devotees. So the reason I'm mentioning you this is that in order to obtain Vraja Bhakti, which should be our ultimate, we have to know what our goal is in Krishna consciousness. It's very elevated, very sophisticated, very aristocratic goal, you could say. And that is to go to Goloka Vrindavan and develop this intimacy, this Vraja Muda Bhakti. You cannot do it without going through that Shiva factor. Shiva's there as the guardian of Vrindavan, and Shiva will allow that mood of Vraja Bhakti to manifest. Like I said, he's a destroyer. Ignorance, material desire, and ahankara. If you're holding on to these things, or things are not worked out with your understanding of Krishna Bhakti and how it works and Chaitanya Vaishnavism, if you're not understanding, if you're holding on to material desires, if you're thinking just in terms of everything's for me, narcissism, ahankara, rather than Krishna, 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 then these things will not allow you to actually advance nicely in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't mean you can't go back to Godhead, but ultimately, these are the teachings. This is how Lord Shiva works as a Vaishnava guru in a very mystical way. It's hard to explain in one sense. But if we invoke Lord Shiva, just like tonight's Shiva Ratri, we're trying to invoke the presence of Shiva one day a year. It's okay, better than nothing, one day a year. But we can be going to the manor and praying to Hanuman as Shiva every day of the year if we're conscious of it. Or if we're conscious of chanting Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, but just by pronouncing Advaita, that's invoking Sadashiva. We have to be conscious of it. So Shiva is there to help us. Shiva, Tattva, Guru Tattva are interconnected. have to appreciate it on that level. We cannot think of Lord Shiva in a negative way. We have to incorporate him into the Sankirtan Yajna. Recently, I was giving the Shiva seminars, and we covered very briefly the Daksha Yajna in the 4th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam. And there's a lot that can be said about that, but basically, Lord Shiva was offended by Daksha, who didn't understand Shiva. He was his son-in-law. And he made a lot of negative, derogatory comments, and he just didn't understand Shiva. And part of that story is to show that if we commit Vaishnava aparad, especially aparad to Lord Shiva, in the name of performing yajna, the yajna will be spoiled. And that Daksha Yajna, it got demolished. Ultimately, things worked out. Daksha repented. His head was replaced with a goat's head, and he actually understood Shiva correctly, and the yajna went on. But I'm mentioning it in relationship to Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan Yajna. It's also yajna by Vishnu, to satisfy Vishnu, to satisfy Krishna, to satisfy Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna, to satisfy Srila Prabhupada and all the predecessor Vaishnava acharyas. We have to perform Sankirtan Yajnas, Harinam, book distribution, education. I'm doing my best to try and educate devotees about this specific topic. This is the Sankirtan Yajna. And if we don't allow, on some level, Lord Shiva to have a place in that yajna, it's going to be problems. That's why I'm saying I'm noticing more and more people becoming more attuned to this idea that, yes, we need to think about this, how to actually, within Prabhupada's institution of ISKCON, how to make sure that Lord Shiva fits in correctly, that we don't keep him away simply because we don't understand him, or because or we worship Krishna, we don't worship Shiva. No, properly understood, we worship both. And we need to understand how that works. Anyway, I'm going on a little bit of a rant. Please, someone else, is some more questions? Anything else I can try and clarify?
Yes, there were some questions on the Shiva Tattvas. So one of the questions is, if the Shiva is non-different to Vishnu, then what is the purpose behind having Vishnu and Shiva as separate gods?
Prabhupada explains that Sadashiva is the original Shiva who manifests Shiva into the material world for Leela, pastimes, certain Leelas. And so Sadashiva with Advaitacharya, had that Leela of Advaitacharya invoking Lord Chaitanya to come, had to happen through Sadashiva. The Leela of Shiva drinking the poison from the ocean, the churning of the milk ocean, happened through Sadashiva. Certain Leelas in the material world have to happen through the agency of either Sadashiva or Shiva. Krishna, Vishnu, he stays out of certain things of the management and the goings on of the material world. But both Sadashiva and Shiva, they act as gurus. They can help us advance in Krishna consciousness. Specifically, the Sadashiva forms are most important. That's Gopishwara Mahadev, Advaitacharya, Lingaraj. I'm stressing tonight, trying to get devotees to understand this Lingaraj identity, and Mahaprabhu chanting the Shivastakam prayers. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna is coming from Lord Chaitanya, basically out of his experience there at the Lingaraj Hari Hara. And also the importance of the Shiva drinking the poison. If we understand the poison to be symbolic of the poison of Mayavad and personalism, these things are all so essential. So it's all ways of Krishna teaching us in the material world through the agency of Shiva, how we need to become purified in our own Krishna consciousness, so that we can ultimately chant Hare Krishna, absorb ourselves in Krishna consciousness, read Prabhupada's books, have nice sadhu sangha, advance in our Krishna consciousness, preach Krishna consciousness to the best of our capacity, and at the time of our passing away from this mortal world, we can hope that that trajectory will take us right back to the spiritual world. Not everyone's going to make it. Prabhupada says many of my disciples will go to the heavenly planets and get born again. But if we go even to the Vaikuntha planets, that's good. In the Nectar of Devotion, it's explained that devotees who make it to Vaikuntha also have an opportunity in Vaikuntha to further elevate themselves to the intimacy of Vraj Bhakti in Goloka Vrindavan. Back home, back to Godhead. That's our theme. This is what Prabhupada came to teach. This is the whole mood of Chaitanya Vaishnavism. And we are antithetical to the Mayavadi concepts. Now we'll find even there are Vaishnavas who worship Krishna. But their intention is not to go back to Godhead. Their intention is ultimately to merge with Krishna or to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. This kind of Krishna Bhakti is poisonous.
Thank you, Ramanath Sukha. I think this question is very relatable to us because, you know, the residing deities at the manor, of course, Ram, Sita, Lakshman, Hanuman. The few devotees have asked actually if you could just, you know, explain and clarify how we can understand that Hanumanji is Shiva. Are there any specific references to that as well?
I have some references from Radhanath Swami where he talks about that. I don't have any references from Srila Prabhupada directly, but there are indirect references from the Ramayana and from the Hanuman Chalisa and other places. And there's many, you know, it's kind of well known that Hanuman is the 11th Rudra or Shiva, coming as the topmost devotee of Ramchandra. So it's kind of common knowledge. I don't have a specific reference from Prabhupada, but I have to leave it at that. I do have a reference from Radhanath Swami, if that would satisfy someone. I don't have it with me right now, but I didn't. This in India, you know, amongst, you know, devotees of Lord Ram, this is also understood. Yes, Hanuman is Vayu, but his internal identity is that as Hanuman. So it gives him all these incredible powers, and his devotion to Ram is supreme. There's no one as devoted to Ramchandra as Hanuman is. So topmost Vaishnava, Hanuman. Topmost Vaishnava in Krishna Lila, Shiva. Topmost Vaishnava, you can make the argument in Chaitanya Lila, is Morai Gupta because he's Hanuman. And he was making all these, you know, taking all these notes in his diary. Had a very intimate connection with Chaitanya. So yeah, topmost Vaishnavas, it's all, it's not a competition to become the best. The point is we should recognize these intimate relationships between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees. This is the give and take of Krishna consciousness. The devotee worships Krishna, and in a sense, Krishna worships his devotee in so many ways. But the devotee has to prove themselves also. Just by reading like the Lilamrita of Srila Prabhupada when he came to America and established the Hare Krishna movement, it was so difficult. There's so many struggles. Prabhupada persisted. And then opportunity after opportunity opened up. Things started happening. There's that one description written by Hayagriva called the Hare Krishna explosion. And that basically happened when Prabhupada went to San Francisco. He got things going in New York, but the Hare Krishna movement exploded in San Francisco because Krishna set it up so that things would explode. Again, it's Krishna serving his pure devotee. That's the point. Krishna serves his devotee and the devotee serves Krishna. There's that natural give and take. That's Krishna Bhakti. That's the intimacy, ultimately, of Vraj Bhakti. Lord Shiva allows entrance into that. There's other factors that allow entrance. Tulsi Maharani allows entrance, Vrinda Devi. Giriraj allows entrance into Vraj Bhakti. Yoga Maya or Purnamasi allows entrance into Vrindavan Vraj Bhakti. And Jamuna, these 5 elements. But Shiva's part of that. Any other questions? Anything in relationship to what I was trying to explain tonight? I hope I didn't confuse people too much.
There are lots of questions, actually. I mean, I think maybe we could take this one question if we could briefly answer this in regards to the Rudras. So we know Hanumanji is 11th Rudra. So do we know what the function of the other 9 Rudras in this material universe is?
Again, from Prabhupada's books, I don't think it's there. I may be wrong, but I don't think it's there in terms of functions of the other Rudras. It was explained to me once that Hanuman is the 11th Rudra because Ravana had 10 heads. In order to conquer Ravana with 10 heads, Rudra had to be the 11th Rudra. Well, that kind of makes sense, but how that all works in a spiritual technology way, I can't really answer. Sometimes I tell the devotees, look, just like tonight, I'm talking over a computer screen, technology of Zoom. Technology is the way of the future, right? The way of the future of the Hare Krishna movement is also technology, but spiritual technology. Part of that spiritual technology is understanding these intricacies of Shiva Tattva. How does it work? To me, that spiritual technology is infinitely more fascinating than the world of ones and zeros and computers. Of course, everything can be utilized in Krishna's service. So there's material high tech and there's also spiritual high tech. So Hare Krishna devotees, we actually have this gift coming from Prabhupada in our lineage of spiritual high tech. We should understand it as best we can. We may not all be Brahmins or have philosophical inclinations, but we should understand the essence. We should understand Shiva, topmost Vaishnava, Guru. He can help us if we understand how to approach him correctly. Maybe I'll inspire some devotees to go to the Lingaraj temple by my story tonight. I don't know. When I went to Bhuvaneshwar, I was not allowed entrance. But the same thing in Jagannath Puri, I cannot get into the temple there either. But still, I was able to circumambulate and, had nice devotee association when I was in Bhuvaneshwar. And I learned a lot. So yeah, I'm tonight's Shiva Ratri, I'm stressing this Bhuvaneshwar connection because it is important, even though Prabhupada didn't talk about it. I'm talking about it simply because I studied it and I started making these connections. Anything else? Any other questions or something I can try and answer?
Ramanath Sukha, with a just overwhelming number of questions that have come in, and I'm just really conscious of the time because it's
Well, what do you want to do? You want to try and go through them and pick out some now that you think are more appropriate? I mean, I've just been going on some rants as questions have been coming in. I was hoping there'd be more questions directly related to my initial talk. But
there's some technical questions, which I think I'm going to not ask them right now. Technical questions on Lord Shiva as well. But okay, maybe just for another 5 minutes, if that's okay, because I'm just conscious of time and getting a little bit late into the evening. So one thing was, why do we not fast if Lord Shiva is actually the topmost Vaishnava? Why do we not fast on this day?
Why do we not fast? Well, it's an institution, it's not the institution of ISKCON, Prabhupada's movement, doesn't say do this necessarily. unless it was established by Prabhupada. Now, as an individual who wants to honor and respect Lord Shiva and undergo, it's an austerity to fast all. It's not easy. I've been fasting and, you know, my head's not so clear and it's like, you know, it's difficult. But you do it to serve as an austerity to please Shiva, to please that essence of Shiva Tattva, which is Guru Tattva as well. So if a devotee wants to do that, that's a choice. The institution of ISKCON should not force devotees to undergo austerities unless they fully understand why they're undergoing austerities. So because there's still a lot of confusion, controversy about Shiva Tattva, even amongst leading, you know, Prabhupada disciples, gurus, sannyasis, etc., it doesn't make sense for ISKCON to institutionalize fasting if there's still a lot of confusion. If devotees want to do it voluntarily, Haribol, all glories to them. But that's an individual choice. Ultimately, Krishna consciousness is voluntary. We have so many rules and regulations and, you know, fast on this day, do this, don't do that. But unless we're actually entering into Krishna consciousness in a willing way that I want to do this, and I know the reason why I want to do it. I know the reason why this austerity is a good thing. I know the reason why I should get up early and chant 16 rounds and worship the deities. It's not simply doing it without understanding it. That's niyamagraha. But we're doing it willingly because we do understand it. So if someone understands the benefits of fast days or doing these things for the benefit of advancing in Krishna consciousness, making that connection on some higher level of consciousness, then it works magic. It's very powerful. Shiva Ratri is the night of Shiva, right? Okay, well, the night is young. You still got many hours to midnight. Of course, we're not going to go on and on in this Zoom meeting, but I'm saying devotees can do what they want. We can take out the Bhagavatam and read Bhagavatam to our family as the night progresses. But, you know, these are individual choices. You can do as you like. And that's as it should be, especially in relationship to Shiva. Shiva doesn't force people. The guru should never force people either. But if you do it with the right intention, the right consciousness, results are there. We don't force people to follow the four regular principles, nor should we judge other devotees if they follow or don't follow. These principles are there to help us advance in Krishna consciousness. We don't force people to chant 16 rounds, but they're there to help us. We don't force. Force never works. If you try and force Krishna consciousness on anyone, sometimes Krishna consciousness is forced on children, and sometimes it's not good. If the child is not ready for it, doesn't want it, it'll backfire in some way. Anyway, force is never recommended. Inspiration and leading through example, this is the way to do it. As Prabhupada did. Prabhupada did not force so many rules and regulations on those early devotees, but gradually, as the devotees became more dedicated and serious about Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada introduced so many things. So within ISKCON, some temples observe Shiva Ratri, some temples don't. I know in Mayapur, they've been worshiping Lord Shiva at Rajpura, the Jagannath temple, for the last 8 or 9 years regularly. And senior devotees give classes on Lord Shiva, and it goes on into the night, and they have Abhishek and so many things are there. But that's Mayapur. But essentially, there's no reason why any temple community can't do something in the right way in honor of Lord Shiva, connecting that Gopishwar Mahadev excitement to help us advance in Radha and Krishna, our devotion to Radha and Krishna. So, okay, this is being sponsored by School of Bhakti, so Radha Gokulananda. You know, we can worship Lord Shiva, understanding that, you know, they'll help us in our devotion to Radha Gokulananda.
And I'd like to mention, Prabhu, that sorry, no, thank you so much, Prabhu. It's just it was just ocean of like nectar, really. Thank you so much for the class, and it was just really wonderful. You mentioned about Mayapur and Rajapur, and I just wanted to mention a little bit about Simantini Devi Temple. And as we know, Simantini is Parvati, and from my understanding that there is a pastime when Shiva was glorifying Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Parvati Devi, and I think it was, you could correct me if I'm wrong, is I think Parvati Devi was filled with joy and requested and she wanted to see Mayapur, and she wanted to see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and she sort of and she basically Parvati Devi desired to sort of immediately drop everything and begin tapasya, and upon receiving Lord Shiva's permission, Parvati Devi came and performed great austerities in the forest for a long time, and then I believe that, you know, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became pleased and gave her his darshan, and
he appeared to her. Yeah, he gave he gave her his darshan. Yeah,
and she became overwhelmed by his wonderful form, which was like brilliant as molten gold, and his smile, which was enchanting as hundreds of like full of sort of hundreds of full moons, and by his mood, which was sweet and benevolent as thousands of springtime. That is what is said. And Parvati Devi could not sort of control her tears. Falling at his feet, she begged Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be able to participate in his manifest Leela in Kali Yuga. Mahaprabhu told her that she was his Yogamaya energy and none different from him, and he told her that she was always his associate in his pastimes as his Sarup Shakti. She is the most dear Srimati Radharani, and the Lord said that as my external energy, you are Durga, the shadow of Srimati Radharani.
Durga.
And you are known as Parvati, and as Yogamaya, you manifest my external pastimes. In Raja, you are Purnamashi, as you mentioned earlier in the class. You always assist me in all my leelas. And now in Navdvip, you are Prodha Maya, and you preside eternally with Shvetapal Shiva to bewilder the conditioned living entities. And those who are my devotees, you will
that's from the
safely guide
Navadip
them back to me.
But go on. Very nice. Go on. Finish.
And then, and upon after hearing this, Parvati Devi was inundated with Gauda Prema, taking the dust from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet. She put it in the center, in the parting line of her hair, which called Simanta. And at that moment, Mahaprabhu sort of disappeared, and she became reverently placed at the dust of the feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on her Simanta. And so one of Parvati's name is Simantini Devi. And so you'll find that in Rajapur, which is in Mayapur, as you mentioned, it's a Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani temple, and just behind the temple you'll see Samantini Devi temple. So I just wanted to mention that. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I just want to follow up a little bit. There is a similarity of the function of Shiva and Parvati. There's distinctions, but there's similarities. That Parvati or Durga, because Parvati is Durga, Simantini is Durga, Mahamaya, but there's the Mahamaya Yogamaya connection. Prabhupada explains it's one energy, two functions. Just like you take electricity, that electricity will cook your food, or you put it in the refrigerator or the freezer to cool it down. Same energy, two functions. So Mahamaya as Durga will keep you in the prison house of this material world, going through repeated samsara cycles of birth and death for a long time. That's her function. She's Mahamaya. She's the Durga. She's She's the warden. But in her function as Yoga Maya, yoga link you to Krishna. So that's how devotees approach her. The very first deities in the Hare Krishna movement came in 1967 in San Francisco, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. Subhadra is the sister of Krishna. That's Durga. We learned that from the 10th canto. That's Durga. But Prabhupada taught us, oh, we approach her as Yoga Maya. She'll help us advance in Krishna consciousness. So the very first deities in the Hare Krishna movement had this understanding of Yoga Maya and Durga contained within them. Whether or not we understand it, when we approach Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, when we go to Soho Temple, that's another thing. But that's there. Now, Lord Shiva functions in a similar way. He'll keep us in the material world if we approach him in the wrong way, which most followers of Lord Shiva do, unfortunately. You approach him in the right way, boom, you're back to Godhead. You're back in Vraj, he'll allow you into the Rasa Leela. Has that kind of intimacy with Krishna, with Radha and Krishna. So you approach Shiva correctly, he liberates you and bestows pure Krishna prema. Quickly, easily, ashutosh. If you approach him incorrectly, you're just full of material desires and you're in Maya. Devotees say, hey, Prabhu, you're in Maya. Okay, better chant Hare Krishna and get out of Maya. But the point is, Shiva and Durga, they have this dual role. Keep us in the material world or to take us out of the material world. So Simantini, yes, this is a relatively new temple in ISKCON. It manifested in Mayapur because it's Simanta Dweep. There, the Rajpur temple with Jagannath there, it's some ways away from the main Mayapur campus, and it's Simanta Dweep. So Jananivas, the head Pujari, and His Holiness Jayapataka Swami, they, in their transcendental communication, they came up with the idea, why not build a shrine to Simantini Devi, which they did. I know a little bit about the back side of that story. The GBCs kind of like said, well, do we really want to do this? Prabhupada never said to do this. And they made a kind of a compromise. Say, okay, let's have a deity of Lord Chaitanya also. So in that shrine, there's a deity of Lord Chaitanya and Simantini. But that's okay, because then the whole pastime of Lord Chaitanya manifesting to Simantini, Durga, can be discussed as part of the temple function. Durga is very much part of the Jagannath temple as Bimala Devi. Bimala Devi is Durga. There's a shrine to Durga in Jagannath Puri temple complex. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur named his son Bimala Prasad, who, hope you all know who Bimala Prasad was. He became Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So Bimala Prasad, why Bimala Prasad? Because they take the offerings of Lord Jagannath and they offer it to Bimala Devi, Durga, and then they distribute it, knowing that it's not just Maha Prasad, but Maha Prasad. So if you go to Jagannath Puri, they're very enthusiastic about Prasadam distribution because they know that, oh, this is like special. Why? Because they offered it to Durga. Now, I'm not saying that ISKCON temples or something like this should do anything like that, but I'm saying there's these transcendental principles at work within our tradition. We need to understand them. We need to understand them, and perhaps, who knows, maybe some adjustments can be made. I sometimes like to tell the devotees that, because Simantini Devi is an innovation. Prabhupada never said to do it. Well, okay, Prabhupada didn't say to do a lot of things. Prabhupada never taught us Giriraj worship, never taught us to worship Vrinda Devi, taught us to worship Tulsi, but not Vrinda Devi. Now, at the manor, you don't have Giriraj, but you have Vrinda Devi. At the Soho temple, you don't have Vrinda Devi, but you have Giriraj. Prabhupada never instructed these things. But Prabhupada did tell his very close disciple, Bhakti Churu Maharaj, this is in his autobiography, in the last days, Bhakti Churu was taking care of Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was confiding to a certain degree in Bhakti Churu and saying that he was basically lamenting, and well, Prabhupada's transcendental lamentation. But he said, 50% of my mission was complete, 50% is incomplete. Think about it. 50% complete, 50% incomplete. So Prabhupada established his ISKCON society so far and gave the rest to us to figure it out. So that 50% is commonly understood as, varnashram development. And I understand that. That's a big topic in and of itself. But I sometimes make the argument that part of varnashram development is how to integrate the devatas, specifically Shiva, Durga. I could even put Ganesh in there because that's another topic. I don't necessarily go there. But how to integrate them into ISKCON in such a way that's actually correct according to our Gaudiya Siddhanta. That Prabhupada would have done this over the course of time if he had enough time. He only spent a few short years with us. Now, many decades later, devotees are like, yeah, maybe, this is something we can be thinking about. And part of that is a Srimantini temple there in Navadvip. It's a total innovation. There were some devotees under GBC who were just against it, but it happened. And it's a wonderful thing. And there at Rajpur, that's where they have the Shivaratri celebrations every year now for a long time. So my point is, I can see within my own participation within Prabhupada's movement, there's changes going on. When I was a young person in my teenage years, there was, the counterculture. The anthem was, "The times they are a-changing." So, good. Change is necessary sometimes. The question is, and Prabhupada says, we have to understand the details of Krishna consciousness that cannot change. I mean, not the details, the basic principles. Basic principles cannot change, but certain details, according to time, place, and circumstance, can be subject to change. And when Prabhupada was asked by my godbrother Shruti Kirti, Prabhupada basically, just said yes, but that takes intelligence. How to do that? How to introduce change that's necessary according to time, place, and circumstance. So my point is, ISKCON can't simply remain in the past. It has to change according to time, place, and circumstance. And Prabhupada himself said, 50% of my mission's complete. So we have this other 50% to be thinking about. So anyway, I'm just hoping and praying. Here I am talking on Shivratri in London, and that this in itself is a change. I don't know. I'm a newcomer to London. I've been here 3 years now. I haven't seen any Shivaratri ceremonies going on in the evening at all. Maybe some talk in the morning. So just having this Zoom meeting is a progressive change, but it should be carefully considered and done in the right way. I didn't ask to do this. I was invited to do it. Say, hey, Hari Bol, Krishna. But my point is, it's a good change if you really can connect it to the Siddhanta of what Prabhupada's talking about in his books, the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and back things up philosophically, shastrically. Bhaktivinoda Thakur established 2 Shiva lingams there at Yoga Peeth. Shiva is there within Mayapur and Vrindavan. They're part of the experience of the holy Dham. So how can we bring those experiences into ISKCON outside of, Mayapur and Vrindavan? That's a big topic. I don't have all the answers, but I'm fascinated about the potentials. And maybe I can be a catalyst for discussion. in my own service to Prabhupada. But I certainly don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I see a certain opening up to these principles of understanding Shiva in relationship to Krishna Bhakti in a more meaningful way, not in a superficial way, but like, how do we do this? What does it mean? How do we actually understand this complex Shiva tattva that Jiva Goswami said is very difficult to understand? Should we just say, well, it's too difficult to understand and leave it alone? Or should we try and understand it?
Thank you so much, Ramanath Sukha. Thank you so much. I understand, and I think there is a lot more, in-depth discussions, and we've got so much more to say. Definitely need to have another session like this, and I think devotees had a lot more questions as well. Apologies to everyone we couldn't get to your questions.
Well, I heard a lot of people from Bhakti Vriksha groups were joining tonight. Maybe they can bring it up in further discussions. I have some different ideas I want to pursue in terms of establishing little preaching videos along these lines about various aspects of Shiva Tattva and Durga, and so we'll see what happens. But I do want to, if there's some way I can make myself available to devotees, like you said, and maybe didn't get their questions answered, I can make myself available some way. We can figure that out. Maybe, I don't know. We have to work it out with School of Bhakti. But I want to thank everyone so much for allowing me to just try and glorify Lord Shiva on this very special Mahashivaratri. It's a very great honor and privilege for me to be here amongst these devotees. I'm learning about so many devotees all the time. I had this wonderful conversation with Neela Mani. Now I'm wondering, she's so qualified. And I was so happy that she gave the class on Shiva Tattva this morning. And there's many qualified devotees in this community I don't even know about. Like I said, I'm a newcomer. And I'm just happy that I was allowed to give this opportunity to serve the devotees with the exclusive pastimes of Lord Shiva. So I said, okay, I'm going to go right for it. I'm going to talk about Shiva in Lingaraj, in Lord Chaitanya and Lingaraj, because I know those are pastimes that devotees haven't heard very much. Some may have. Anyway, thank you again. Thank you, Madhva. Thank you, School of Bhakti. Thank you, everyone, for taking this opportunity on Shivaratri. Please, for those of you that have the opportunity, keep going. Get out your Bhagavatam. Read, the Daksha Yagya, or read the story of Lord Shiva drinking the poison ocean. Or the 12th canto is this wonderful story of Markandeya Rishi. Read the stories of the Prachetas. I mean, everything is there in Prabhupada's books. Sometimes when Prabhupada was preaching, it's simplistic, kind of black and white, but the nuances are there in Prabhupada's book. So if you can continue with this discussion in your own way, in your own family, in your own devotee community association, I'm not telling you what to do, but if you want to do it, I encourage you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And if everyone can just be unmuted to really give a shout out to Ramanath Sukha and thank him from our core of our hearts for giving us your time and really taking us through. And
Jai Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gauranga.
Yeah.
Gauranga.
Can't hear you, Prabhu.
we're gonna have to end the session. Thank you everyone for your time this evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You know we're on mute. Huh?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
You are on mute.
Hare Krishna. Great session.
Shiva 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 Shambhu